Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leathertainment Studio Podcast. Today we have a unique guest. First time we have an author on our podcast, and this came about after I read his book on the status game, which to me was very relevant to what we're inspecting in here in the leather luxury space. And Will Storr has a wealth of insights on this area, on this status and prestige game that we all play somehow in life. And I thought he would provide a lot of valuable insights to us. So he was kind enough to spare time and be with us today. So, Will, welcome to the podcast. And I would like to start with a personal introduction. Can you just introduce yourself and how did you end up going into this subject of status game writing? It's quite a unique topic so far in my readings, and we get to know you from that question on.
Thanks, Tanner. Yeah, I'm a writer. I used to be a journalist, and now I write books mostly about storytelling and the human experience. And lots of my books have been about the conscious experience of human life, which is like a story. Like the brain is this great storyteller that makes this story of our lives. And then what I wanted to do with the status game is to kind of dive a bit into the subconscious to find out, okay, so if the conscious experience of life is a story, what's the subconscious experience? Like what's going on, subconsciously? And the answer is a lot of it is about the pursuit of status.
That's that's very unique. And reading the book, there's a lot of interesting stories how this game is played in different parts of the world and different social concepts. Can you introduce that concept of status game to our audience who may not have read the book yet? And somehow we will get into discussing this concept from that luxury brands and leather industry standpoint as much as we can later on.
Yeah, so sure. So the basic shape of human social life is groupish. So human beings are these weird species of ape that come together into groups, and the groups solve problems. That's how we do everything. So that's how we do politics. That's how we do business. It's how we do revolution, war, everything. Like humans never act alone. We always act into groups. So that's what our brains do. Our brains compel us to form into groups to solve problems. And those groups have a certain way of functioning, and the principal way is that they're status games. So when we join into a group, no matter what group it might be, we never want to be at the bottom of the group. We always want to rise up. We want to be seen as above average members of the group. So that's what we do. We compete to be higher status in that group, and like in any game, there has to be a way of measuring our status. Like in Monopoly, you've got like Monopoly money. In football, you've got goals. In politics, you've got votes. In business, you've got profit. So in every game, there's different ways of measuring status, and that's very much where luxury goods come in. Like because not everybody, but a certain kind of narrow proportion of humans play status games around luxury goods, and that's how they that's how they show the status that they've earned in life. And you don't have to play luxury games. Like if you're playing the game of a Buddhist meditator, you're competing on how little you can live with and how simple your life can be and how little you can own. So there are all different kinds of ways that we play status games. It's not always about luxury. It's not always about money. But it often is. It often is.
I see. Yeah, we're gonna get to that different types of games, the success game, you say, the virtue game in the book, and all that stuff. Very interesting concepts, and it made me realize I was considering myself, oh, I don't care about these luxury brands, I don't play that game, but I realized that I think I care about other games than that success games and all that stuff. But definitely, we want to come to that and discuss it a little bit further. So. When we're looking at, from my point of view here, inspecting these luxury leather goods, the products are quite expensive, a lot more than the material and the quality can justify from a professional standpoint. And in this sense, does these brands establish themselves as cues or symbols of this prestige they produce for their customers who are actually buying the status or prestige produced here, not the leather bag. It's the bag is more like a vehicle. The status is loaded on. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you know, in the groups we evolved in, that were hunter gatherer tribes, like forager tribes, who spent like hundreds of thousands of years living in tribes, and that's where this stuff evolved. That's how our brains evolved to play these games. And in the days of those tribes, you know, one of the ways that you would earn status is by being highly competent, successful at something. And you'd show your success. You might have a like a necklace of teeth or skulls of animals that you killed in hunts, or whatever it might be. Sorcerers would have maybe headdresses to show their rank. So that's how we've evolved, and luxury goods are just super modern versions of a hunter's necklace of teeth. That's what they are. They're ways of kind of showing people I've achieved a certain. These are the spoils of my competence. You know what they're really saying is that I'm really successful. I'm really competent. That's what kind of people are doing.
That's actually a great analogy. I never thought of it that way. The teeth necklace is equivalent, but yes, it definitely is. It's just showing I am accomplished, and without saying it, it's just showing it. And bags and necklaces and watches are pretty convenient ways of carrying this around with us these days in our modern life. That's beautiful. So, how do these brands create this prestige? Is it conscious? Is it subconscious? Is it like a mix of both? Like, what is it?
Well, it's mostly subconscious, I would say. There are various ways that you create this mystique. A big one is called storytelling. The way you access people's subconscious minds is by telling great stories. And a lot of these luxury brands have a great story attached to them. Burberry. Like a lot of the leather goods companies that you explore in your videos will tell a story about craftsmanship and handmade, and these people spent years learning and to stitch this thing together in a certain
That's right.
way. So that's one way, is with the storytelling. But another very simple way is just this idea. In the book I talk about how the fact that status leaks. If we are perceived to be high status people, then some of their high status leaks onto us. And it goes the other way too. If we're perceived to be near low status people, their low status leaks onto us too. So just the impression that kind of high status people are using Birkin bags or Hermes coats or whatever, just attaches a huge amount of status onto those products. One of the ways that we've learned to organize ourselves, and there's a good reason for it. So in the tribes in which we evolved, the idea is that the brain would subconsciously figure out who are the high status people in this group, right? Because the high status people in this group are the most successful, they know the most, and I want to become like them. So what you do
Right.
is you identify subconsciously the high status people, and then you've got this kind of mechanism that switches on. I call it copy, flatter, conform. You automatically start copying them, and you don't just copy say they're a great hunter. You don't just copy their hunting moves. You copy everything about them. You copy the way they walk, the way they dress, the way they talk, the stories that they tell. So we're very good at sort of automatically copying people that we identify as high status. To kind of crazy degrees. Like I remember when I was a kid, back in the 80s, I was like 8 or 9 years old, and the first kind of high status person that I glommed onto was this singer called Nick Kershaw, like a pop singer, and I remember realizing one day I'd seen him on television being interviewed, and he was like sitting with his legs crossed in this weird fashion where his ankle was on his knee and everything. And I noticed that. And then I noticed at school that day, I started doing that myself, like sitting with my legs crossed in this weird way. And I remember thinking, why am I doing that? Like, I'm doing that because Nick Kershaw did it. It's so weird. But it made me feel good because it made me feel like I'm like Nick Kershaw, this guy that I kind of really look up to. So that's a sort of classic example of this kind of copy, flatter, conform mechanism. It's why we tend to find ourselves liking the books that favourite singers like. Like, why would a singer be able to recommend a book? But they do. We read their books. So that's how status works, and as it's for a very good reason. It's because if we copy the high status person, then we're going to hopefully figure out how to become high status ourselves, which is what the brain wants us to do. So that's how a lot of the luxury goods works. Is that we see pop stars and models and even politicians or whoever, wealthy, successful people using these products, and the brain subconsciously goes, well, I need to
I
use that
want to
product
do
too
the
because then
same.
I become high status.
Right. This is great. Yeah. That's where the celebrity endorsements, all these, commercial ad partnership, which all these brands do frequently, comes in place, I guess. So one thing I'm kind of like having difficulty understanding the way these games played in different fields or industries are quite different. For example, we can play the success status game using cars, right? You can
Mm.
go and buy a Mercedes Benz, which maybe like 120,000 US dollars, versus a Toyota, which could be around 40K. It's like 1 to 3 times price difference. When you look at these two cars, you will see some differences, the materials, the technology, the comfort. There is some justifiable differences you can feel in the car space. And difference from 1x to 3x is not that enormous as well. But when I'm looking at the leather industry or the watch industry or the clothing, sometimes this multiplier of the price can be minimum 5 times of a comparable quality item, or sometimes goes to 20 or more times of that price. It isn't that little like too much of a difference in that space that you're paying way too much when you're trying to play the game in this clothing or small accessory space versus cars or homes. Why the difference is coming from?
Well, there's a couple of things you need to understand. The first thing to understand is that everybody in the world isn't playing status games versus everybody else in the world. So the people at the bottom aren't competing with the people at the top. So you're not going to get like a teacher competing with Taylor Swift because they would just have a nervous breakdown. You can never compete with Taylor Swift. How it works is we just play these games with each other, with our peers. So Elon
Right.
Musk plays a status game with Jeff Bezos, and Taylor Swift plays a status game with, I don't know, Rihanna or somebody. So that's why status games are so difficult, because you don't get to the level of Taylor Swift and you're happy because she's not competing with everybody else. She doesn't care that she's in the top 0.1% of status people in the world, because she cares about the people coming up behind her who are younger and have better songs or whatever it might be.
Right.
So that's how that works. So the people who are buying the most expensive handbags aren't looking at the people buying the cheapest and going, well, I'm getting ripped off, because all they care about is the other people that have handbags like they have, and do they know that I've got this really super rare, very prestigious kind of handbag. But I guess the bigger thing is that, I guess that one of the biggest things I learned from this research is that identity is the most important thing that people own. It's the most important possession that you have. It's way more important than money, your identity. And by identity, I mean who you feel you are and who other people feel you are. People die for identity. People do suicide bombing for identity. They join the army for identity. Like identity is everything to people. It's far more important than simple money and getting a bargain. So people will spend huge amounts of money for a marginal kind of boost to their perceived identity. And that's how luxury goods work. I mean, especially watches. Watches is nuts, because the function of a watch is to tell you the time, which you just get off your phone, right? But all of that, the amount of money that people spend on watches is just unbelievable. It's extraordinary, and it's 100%. It's 0% about telling the time. They don't need to tell the
Right.
time on their watch. It is 100% about identity, and it's the same with the products on your channel with the handbags, the leather goods. I mean, it's fascinating to see how little leather is in some of these products. But I
Yep.
suspect that the people who are buying the handbags just don't really care, because what they care about is what the person sitting over the table from them in the Michelin star restaurant thinks about them. And they're, look, she clocked my amazing handbag. Yes, the handbag is worth
Just
it
worth
now.
the
It's
price.
worth the
Yeah.
thousands of dollars, because that pop star Duchess looking lady, I saw she clocked it and she likes it. You know.
That's awesome. That's a great way of explaining it. Thank you. Yeah, I think watches are definitely way above the leather luxury, which I'm having difficulty understanding, but you're absolutely right. So there's quite extreme examples in the Hermes brand, for example. I have huge respect for the brand, what they created, They have bags at $400,000. And I heard a story from a friend here, which had a friend who worked at Hermes, and where she sold a $250,000 worth of bag a day very happy, made a huge commission. And about a week later, the lady came back, said, "Well, this bag is quite small, it's not fitting all my things." And now the sales agent is little not happy, the lady's gonna give me the bag, make me return it. I'm gonna have to return my commission and all that. But what happened was she ordered another one, a bigger one, for another $250,000. So this is like half a million in two bags. But as you said, I think these extremes is just explainable with that marginal impact on the identity. Like the reason people become a suicide bomber, right? Their IDs are incredibly important, and probably the similar mechanisms in the psyche goes on justifying these purchases. Is that right?
That's right. People don't willingly just kill themselves for money. They willingly kill themselves for identity. So yeah, so identity, as I say, it's the most valuable possession that we have. And the reason that some people are obsessed with money, but they're not obsessed with money because they want the actual money. They want what the money says about their identity. That's what they want when they're when they're obsessed with money. So yeah, identity is everything. And when you understand that, all the luxury goods things, I think it makes sense. Um, we think in two ways. We have the story in our brain, the voice that's telling us all the information about why we do what we do, and we have the feelings. But the feelings are much more important. The reason that we will spend 3 times more on a Starbucks latte than a McDonald's latte isn't because the Starbucks tastes 3 times nicer, because it tastes almost identical to the McDonald's. It's because the Starbucks makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves than queuing up in McDonald's for a latte. And that's what Starbucks do. They dress up their stores with wood, and there's nice cakes, and they call you by your name. They just make you feel a bit better than they do in McDonald's, and that's worth 3 times more for what is essentially the same product. So even in the non-luxury space, we're constantly paying a premium because of how that product makes us feel about ourselves, how that product makes us feel good about our identity.
That's beautifully put. I think you might be incredibly efficient as a marketing teacher in an MBA program or something with this storytelling and these aspects from your career now. Like I read the book, the storytelling, the science
Oh,
of storytelling as
right.
well. So I think once you compile these two concepts together, there is enormous benefits for a business person or anybody involved in marketing I can get from you. So I highly recommend your books to people who are into this branding space. Quite valuable insights here. So
Thank
there
you.
was pic, a section in the book where you mentioned larger the logo, less the price. So that part I am little confused from my experience, because in some brands I see really large logos and they are kind of intentionally keep doing those designs. But on the other hand, there's other brands that are very like hidden with logos, like quiet luxury, they call themselves too. So what was that concept or research told you in that part of the game?
Yeah, well, they analysed a certain number of certain sort of luxury brands in which it was true that the larger the logo, the cheaper the product, and I think that's sort of, I don't know how old the study was. I know fashion is always changing, and maybe it's different now. But certainly when the study was made, that was just true. Like, so the bigger the logo, the lower in the socioeconomic group the purchaser would be, until you got right to the top where there were handbags that were so expensive there was no logo on them. The logo was inside, and it was all about the stitching and all this other stuff. What they found was that what was it, something like a 1 point reduction in the font of the logo. No, a 1 point increase, sorry, in the font in the logo led to a decrease in price of $122. So there's a very significant, so the bigger the logo, and certainly I think that's true. Certainly in the UK, where we're very class bound culture, and the idea of having big logos on everything is seen as much more working class than having no logos, which is seen as much more kind of upper middle, I would say, class.
Oh, from that explanation standpoint, it makes a lot more sense, and it's very parallel to my findings too. I think when I'm thinking about these brands with large logos, their consumer base, I think that holds up still true. So, makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. The higher the brand, the higher the price point goes. Logos disappeared quite small because
And what they were saying
yeah,
in the paper was that again, because you're signaling to people like you, your peers. So the women
right,
with the best handbags, they would be handbag connoisseurs, and they could tell by the detail in the stitching that their handbag was amazing. And but they could also, but most importantly, they could tell other women's handbags were amazing, and they would know. So they didn't need the logo because they could tell by the stitching that this was, a really superb piece of handbaggery. So that's how that would work. It's always signaling. It's always going on, but it's just for different status games, the signaling is different. And it's the same as true over here in the UK in terms of cars. So in the UK, to have like a shiny brand new Japanese or German car is actually quite middle class. It's quite a middle class thing to have a brand new Mercedes, a brand new Lexus, or whatever. The aristos, the people at the very top, the royalty, they will look down their nose at a brand new car. They're driving beaten up old Land Rovers with covered in dog hairs and mud, and that's their status game. That's their signaling to each other because it's signaling I don't care about new things. I'm all about hand
right,
me downs. I'm all about Prince Charles is famously very proud of his coat that he's fixed himself. That's how aristos play status games, but it's not about money because they're above money.
right.
It's about longevity and reusing things, and yeah. So it's a mistake. Like it's a mistake to think that status games are always about more money being better, or at
Right.
least the display of more money being better. Like I'm sure that aristos all know how much money each other's got roughly, and measure each other against that, and pity people who can't afford to keep the roof of the stately home going. But what they show, what they present, is is almost anti-money because it's like they're above money, they're beyond it. Money is vulgar to them. So that's how it
Right.
works over here.
I see. Yeah. The level of yourself and the status in the society changes the game you play, I guess, like the
Yeah,
different games, because it's a smaller group. They understand they have different rules and all that stuff. So,
yeah,
and they're
yeah,
not
yeah.
concerned what the larger group thinks of them at that point anyways. They're just playing to their rivalry.
That's right. So that's what the studies find is surprisingly, like again, we're used to thinking about the more money that you've got, the happier you are. But it's not true. It's like what people care about is the people in their social group, what they think of them. So people who are working class don't really care what upper class people think of them, and vice versa. What they care about is what their neighbours think of them, and their colleagues think of them, and people down the street think, what their friends think of them. That's what obsesses people and get people to get upset about. So we're always playing these very local status games. We're not that bothered about.
I
And so what
see.
predicts happiness is not where your socioeconomic group is in the hierarchy. It's what the people around you think of you.
Got it. Got it. That's fascinating. So, I don't know if you watched my videos where I destroyed the bags and made analysis, but I was very unaware of this brand game. I never cared until I needed a bag to go to work first time I joined the corporate world. And I realized these large price tags, and I'm coming from a leather background. I've tanned leather since I was a child, and I couldn't find what I was looking for, that natural, authentic leather. Everything was highly processed, plasticized, standardized outside of leather, in my opinion. Yet I was very confused, like why these huge prices for super mediocre bags, in my opinion, from an artisan standpoint. And that's how it started. I bought a bag from LV, which was the first time I've been in the store. And I was always thinking that the signature brown bag with the large logo on it was leather, but the the sales associate told me that that was coated canvas. It wasn't even leather. So, anyways, I bought it. I just wanted to open it up, see what's going on, like what's special for this price. And that's how we made the first video, and people liked it. And we keep listening what people are asking us to do, like, can you do this brand? Can you do this model of the bag? To analyze it. And what I see as a response from people is there is a clear two sides of this game or argument. And it's either a love or hate relationship with these brands. Some people are very aware what's going on. They're like, of course, it's not about the leather or craftsmanship. It's about the logo. It's about the status you're displaying. We know we're paying a lot for what the bag is worth in a material sense. And on the other side, people hate it. People say like it's not worth it. It's a ripoff. They absolutely is like a very polarized two opposite feelings in the same society we live in. So why are we so spread apart in the same brand, living in the same society, like how that part works.
Well, so I think so when you say you've got two different people with two different responses, what you're seeing is people who identify with the product and people who don't identify with the product. So people who play games with that product, who accept its status, who say, yeah, you know, Hermes or whatever it is amazing, Gucci is amazing, whatever it might be. They're going to defend it because they're identifying with their product. That product is part of the story of their identity. Because that's what we do. You know, we do it with brands all the time. Like you know, you see it with the Apple obsessives who constantly are all over line, like the internet, like having to go people with Android phones. Like it's so dumb. but they've allowed Apple to become part of their identity. You know, part of their identity is I'm an Apple fan. I'm an Apple addict. I'm in the Apple ecosystem, and it's literally part of their identity. It's a status game that they're playing. So you see them, they go online and they get all emotional about it and they defend Apple and say, oh, it's much better than Android. You know, they go, and I'm sure it's the other way with the Android people. And it'd be the same with luxury kind of handbags. If you identify with the kind of product that they're making, then you're going to sort of be much more likely to defend it than if you're not. And ultimately, what I would say is that okay, there's a point at which you are getting ripped off, which is if you buy a massively expensive handbag and it is crap and it falls to pieces and it's not waterproof or whatever it might be, then yeah, you're being ripped off. If it's not functional. But assuming that it's functional, even if you're spending 200 grand more than it's worth, like in terms of materials, if you've got the money, it's worth it. And it's worth it because of how it's making you feel. Because how it makes you feel is all important. If when you use that handbag, you feel incredible. And when you go out into the world and you see women that you admire and respect glancing at your handbag, and every time they glance at your handbag, you feel good. It's worth every penny, assuming you can afford it. I mean, I as a writer, I buy these A4 German-made notebooks, and they cost about £25. You can get an almost identical one from Amazon Basics for £5.99, but I still buy the £25 one. Partly because it's got these little details. It's functionally exactly the same. I even think that the quality is very close. But every time I use that notebook, I feel good. I feel different. You know, there's something about the feel of the paper. So I know it's a rip-off in a sense, in that kind of basic utilitarian sense of it's the profit margin's much bigger for the German company. But I don't care because I'm buying how that notepad makes me feel. And I think we do that all the time, and the people that take best advantage of that are the watch people and the luxury goods, the luxury handbags, the leather people.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great point. And I think it's one of the best businesses of our age right now. Like the probably richest man on earth owns pretty much all of these brands that do the same feeling and charge you
Yeah,
a good
yeah,
premium for it. And for example, Hermes is not owned by them as much as I know, but the Hermes alone is almost as big as maybe half the size of this entire LVMH group. And
wow,
it's incredible how they play this game and how they create this feeling for their customers. So I realize there is a thing called playing the RMS game, that you can't even go in the store and start buying things right and left. They don't show you. Like I went there, and they are not even showing me anything because I'm not in their customers. They're just showing me the small stuff, the wallets, the belts, and shoes. But when I asked for a
really?
bag, it's like, no, we don't have anything. Last week I was in
Oh.
Istanbul airport. I saw Hermes store. I walked in, and the clerk saw me and they're like, oh, we just sold the last bag in the store right before you. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure you did, but I'm gonna look at it anyway. So, you know, to me, I watch these videos online and social media. People say like, I've been going and playing all these Hermes games, wearing my Hermes bracelets, my shawls or whatever it is, so they can start showing me some of the bags and I can start buying the bags. They're like desperately, genuinely wanting this product they want to get their hands on, but they're not even shown the possibility. And sometimes we hear like they don't even give you the option to choose a color or something. You're shown something, you better take it, otherwise you might not be shown something next day. So seeing these things people have to play to get a product from the brand, it's to me it's off-putting. Like you're a brand, you kind of need to respect your customer a little bit more than this. But in a sense it's the other way, but it makes the customer base want the brand even more. So is that some of the ways these brands engineer this status or luxury game around these logos?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a part of it is scarcity. Is that we've got this kind of bias in our brains that wants to value things that are scarce. That's a basic one. So if like the only luxury thing I've ever bought in my life is a Leica camera, and they were really good at saying, oh, they're really good at thinking of the new cameras come out, but there's only 4 in the country, and there's a waiting list, and somehow whenever I'd go into the Leica shop, it's like, but we've got one, we've actually got one. You're so lucky, but it's like it's funny because every time they had just one. So Leica are really good at doing that scarcity thing, but I think the bigger thing that they're doing is that they're, you know. The best status games, the highest status games are really hard to get into. They're difficult to get into. Like, it's hard to become friends with Michelle Obama. It's hard to play tennis with Serena Williams. It's hard to work your way up to a top position at kind of I don't know, come to Apple or Tesla or SpaceX or whatever it might be. So it's almost like a tribal thing that you're describing, where they're basically telling these people, this is a really, really, really hard club to get into. You've got to be really earn your place in this status game, and that's going to drive people's status mechanisms crazy. That's going to make them desperate to get in, because I assume that the ultimate goal isn't for them to always reject everybody. It's to slowly tempt them in. Well, you've got this, and maybe we can give you this now, and maybe we can give you this now. Yeah, I think that's what's going on. And also, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately, if they are kind of just judging people on, like, do you look like the kind of person that we want to have this kind of handbag? And if you're not of the body type or the age or the social class, because again, status leaks. There was the famous story that we had in the UK of Burberry, where Burberry check began to be worn everywhere by very working class celebrities. I think this is back in the 90s, and Burberry were in panic mode because all these working class people were wearing Burberry check. So nobody high status wanted to wear Burberry anymore. So they had to kind of rescind all these licensing deals they had to go to this kind of panic mode to kind of undo all the damage that these working class celebs, reality TV stars with Burberry check prams and all this stuff. That's their way of protecting their brand, and it's pretty ugly. It's pretty unpleasant, but I've no doubt it goes on.
Right, that's true. Very, very interesting things. Well, um, are there any different types of games to gain and present this status? And if so, what sorts of games are out there? And can one play more than one? Do we play multiple games in life? And do we get to choose them, or do we decide to not to play some games that we see in our society? Like, how we decide on those things?
Yeah, so we always play multiple games at once, especially in the West. Basically, every kind of identity you have is a status game. So you might be a footballer, an employee of this company, a fan of this band, a fan of these kinds of clothes. There's a test called the I am test. If you write down I am and answer the question I am 20 times, you're going to come up with all these different identities. I am an Apple fan. These are all identities. So these are all status games that we can play, that we do play. So our job is a status game. If we're in politics, that's a status game. We're on social media, we're playing status games with other people. So we're always doing it in all kinds of different contexts. But broadly speaking, there are kind of 3 different kind of versions of the status game that we play. The basic one, the oldest one, is the dominance game, the kind of dominance games. And dominance games are all about violence and threat. So you're basically forcing, whether it's in war, in physical combat, or in the courtroom, you're forcing people to kind of attend to you in status. So these are kind of, so it's not just physical violence, there's also social violence. So when people are kind of, teasing you, mocking you, cancel culture is about dominance. Anything that's got reputation destruction or ostracization, that's dominance. So we've been playing dominance games for millions of years. Animals play dominance games. We still do, sadly. But the other 2 games are all about reputation, and these are kind of virtue games, I call them, and prestige games. So if you go back to the tribes in which we evolved, when our brains were evolving the mechanisms to play these games, the whole point of them is to kind of incentivize people to be useless to the tribe. You know, so you earn status by showing that you're valuable to the people around you. And there are two ways of showing that you're valuable to the people around you. The first way is by being virtuous. So a tribe member who's like courageous in battle, or selfless and generous, or virtue is also about the rules, knowing the rules, following the rules. It's about believing the sacred beliefs, you know, religiosity, all that stuff. So you can play virtue games, and you can achieve high status by being virtuous. So you can think about the Pope. Um, the Pope isn't high status because he's any good at anything. He's high status because he's virtuous. You know, and you know the status for him is front and center in the Catholic Church. I mean, it's very nakedly about status, the Catholic Church. You know, you could say the same about people who work. You know, maybe Michelle Obama is more known for being virtuous for her politics than she is for actually being competent at anything. So that's one way, virtue. Yeah. But the other way is success games, and success games is all about being competent or being good at something. So Serena Williams, he plays a success game because he's a brilliant tennis player. Gordon Ramsay plays a success game because he's a brilliant, chef. Elon Musk plays a success game because he's a brilliant technologist. So it's a very different way of earning status than virtue. But all of us play all these games all the time. You know, like even Elon Musk has cares somewhat about being seen as a morally good person. Michelle Obama cares about being seen as a competent person. She was a lawyer at one point. That was a success game. So we're all playing all these games all at once, but there are different kinds of games. There are different routes to status that we can follow.
I see. Yeah, this is very eye-opening from a personal standpoint for me after listening the book. I ordered the physical copy of the status game too, but it hasn't arrived yet. I listened it on Audible twice. Every time I listened, I noticed the games I'm playing, which I wasn't aware of before. Some of it, we just do it. But once you tell us the concept, I was like, oh yeah, I care about that. I do play this. Um, are any of these games evolve in time or die? Some of them are transient in nature, or some of them are permanent. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are certain games that kind of rise and fall. I mean, in the book, as you know, I talk about behaviours that have been cancelled out by status. So, for example, dueling used to be a big thing in Europe, and loads of men died by dueling. They would insult each other and then have a duel with swords or pistols, and one would die. It's a ridiculous thing to do. But dueling was very much an aristocratic pursuit. And it died when it became more when it started being practiced by the middle classes, because then the middle classes started dueling. So the aristocrats stopped because it became low status, and because the aristocrats stopped, everybody stopped. So that's kind of how that works. And that's similar to that. That's the mistake that Elon Musk has made with his blue ticks on Twitter recently, taking the blue ticks away, because blue ticks was once seen as kind of high status and desirable, so everybody wanted to earn the blue ticks. But now he's enabled everybody to have them. So now the high status people on Twitter have seen that everyone's like the low status people got blue ticks. Now the high status people don't want blue ticks anymore. So he's kind of broken the whole system. And actually, it's extremely bad psychology. That decision was ridiculous because even the high status people on Twitter like Stephen King, who will swear blind that they don't care about the status that the blue tick communicates. Subconsciously they do, because we all do. And you might, I don't know if you're on Twitter, but you might have noticed that lots and lots of high status people on Twitter really saying, I don't care about the blue tick, but really talking about it an awful lot for people that care about their blue ticks being taken away. So yeah, I mean, a similar thing happened. I mean, it's one of the kind of rare good news story out of China was that they've massively reduced the consumption of shark's fin soup by forbidding its consumption by high status people at banquets, by having Chinese celebrities disavow eating shark's fin soup, and consumption of shark's fin soup has almost collapsed because of their very smart and surprisingly progressive campaigning around it.
That's interesting, and I think it's a good thing that if we understand the dynamics of these games, some specific ones that could be detrimental somehow, like the duels or the shark fins, the outcome is not really desirable. And if, as long as we understand how we can manipulate and ease off this game out of the society, I think it's a great thing. So great examples on those two. Thank you for that. And how do you see the evolution of future of this luxury game in this accessories or leather or brands with the overtaking of Gen Z in the decision makings of social and economical life? This Gen Z thinks differently, acts differently than and some of the other generations. And I see significant dynamics shifting already, which they're not in full power yet in all these decisions in economy or social life, but they will be soon enough. So, what do you see in your experience? What are the impacts might be on these games we're playing these days?
Well, so Gen Z is interesting because you know, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the West was pretty much playing success games. You know, I grew up; it was all about competent success, showing off what you got, and then bling and all that business. But it's interesting Gen Z because they really grew up after the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, when the economies of the West started failing, and when the perception came about that the game was fixed, and the stories about the Gen Z are kind of deprivileged in terms of status. It's very hard for them to get on the property ladder. The graduates are underemployed, leaving university, and so on. So I think what you've seen with Gen Z is a shift away from success games and into virtue games. And so lots of Gen Z people are much more interested in virtue based status than success based status. So I think what's going to be interesting to see is as they grow up and they do become financially successful, whether they will stop doing that a little bit. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't think they're going to stop it entirely. It's
Right.
certainly the case that due to kind of pressure from Gen Z upwards, a lot of major organizations are having to take their kind of virtue-based status much more seriously and are being kind of corralled into being more sustainable, more diverse, and all these other watchwords that are kind of afoot at the moment. So yeah, I think the influence of Gen Z is real. I think it's virtue game based much more than success game based. And I think it will depend on what happens to the West economically over the next 10, 20 years. Like if things continue being tough, then it's not going to change. But if Gen Z suddenly become wealthy in their middle age, as millennials are, they might find themselves stopping caring quite so much about these issues potentially.
That's right, because people change too, right? The way you feel and think in 20s is way different than in your 40s. It's a completely different world. You're the same person, but have different things, different values.
And you're
Absolutely.
playing different
Uh,
games as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, as you move up in your life and social status. So, and there is that pressure. Most companies start talking about all these trends, environmental sustainability approaches, and sometimes even becoming troublesome. I just made a video today about greenwashing. It became a term. So many companies are like under or misrepresenting the environmental impacts of their products just to go along with this trend and increasing demand from Gen Z, and sometimes they're getting in trouble for stretching the truth or straight out lying about their practices. A lot of companies are getting sued for greenwashing practices in their marketing these days because they're so pressured by the Gen Z's approach, and they're having difficulty, how to respond to it in the right way, I guess. So and I remember that was a term you used in the book's status generating machine, and this was not talked about in a brand context as far as I remember, but it made me think of this questions: are these brands, the super brands, if you will, are one status generating machine for their customers? Once you buy the product, once you carry the logo, then these brands are obligated to keep generating this status each and every day by their advertising, by their flagship real estate stores, by their celebrity endorsements and appearances and all that stuff. So the logo you have basically an outlet for that status constantly being generated by that brand, so you can carry around and radiate it. Am I interpreting it in the wrong way, or is it
No, that's exactly
applicable?
right. Yeah. So in the book, I say that all successful groups are status generating machines, and that's true. So if you're working for a successful company, that's status for you because you're proud. I'm working for this amazing company. We're doing all these amazing things in the world, whether it's making money or changing the world for the better or whatever. So it works for you as an employee because you get to take home some status for yourself. I work for this incredible company. I'm really proud of it. A football team, a successful football team is a status generating machine. We won this, we won that. So every successful group is a status generating machine. It earns status in competition with its rival games, and it pays it back to all of its members. And that's absolutely true of products. Successful products are status generating machines. Apple is, famously, they're not the world's greatest innovators. They tend to take what's already out there and perfect it. So innovation isn't really their thing. I mean, of course, they have innovated. The iPhone was an incredible, world-changing invention. So but the innovation is really going on in the Android space in the since in the last sort of decade at least. But they're much more high status, and they're more high status because they cost more money. I watched the latest Nicolas Cage movie last night. The unbearable weight of massive genius, it's called, and everyone's got iPhones in that, all the cool people have got iPhones in that. So yeah, and that allows people to feel who are using iPhones to feel high status. So that's absolutely right. I mean, successful brands are status generating machines.
Okay, awesome. And if we were to, do we have ability to pick some of these games we play, or can we just refrain from playing some of them consciously, or this is more of an automatic thing, we just go into it?
Yeah, of course you can choose to play. Like you can choose to support a football team. You can choose to volunteer. And earn some virtue status if you've not got enough in your life. You can choose these things. But I think we overestimate our ability to sort of choose the big games we play in life because a lot of it comes from our kind of personality and temperament. So if you're an introvert, and it's going to be difficult for you to become, I don't know, a dancer, for example, because every time you go on stage, you're going to go, this is horrific, So our personality, which is kind of has a significant genetic component, influences what status games that will join, in life. But I think what you can't do is choose not to play any status game because it's deeply, deeply wired into us. And what status basically is the feeling of I'm of value to the human family.
Right.
I'm a value to people. People look at me and they go, there's a valuable person, whether it's virtue-based value or competence-based value. And that's a really good thing. Like, it's really good that we crave status, that we need status, because status is a signal that we're valuable to other people. So if you stop caring about status, you stop caring about being valuable to other people. And if you stop caring about being valuable to other people, your life is done. You are over.
Right.
It's a
You lost
definition of a
purpose.
loser. Yeah, so you do, so yes, people can drive themselves crazy pursuing status, and they sometimes do. But you don't want to get rid of it completely, because if you get rid of it completely, your life is done. You're going to end up smelly in a room somewhere with nobody ever coming round. It's not.
Hopefully
It's
that
not
doesn't
good. So
happen to, yeah, hopefully that doesn't happen to anybody. So in that thing, that's the last question I have, and I think it ties down very good up on this answer. How to play the game successfully, and as far as I understand, like, there's no winning of this game. It's for the sake of playing. And how do you play it successfully?
So there are a few kind of hints and tips about playing the status game successfully. I think one of the big ones that people find surprising is that you don't want sudden high status, because the brain isn't designed. We're designed to play status games in small hunter-gatherer groups with 30, 40, 50 people. And so what you see with people who become very famous very quickly is often they get very mentally ill. There are so many stories about crazy famous people and crazy, CEOs. You just can't count them. Like, we're not like it will drive you mad to getting too high status, and that's partly because we're not designed to have that much status pumped into us. We tend to believe it when people say we're amazing. We're very good at accepting compliments. Humans, we're very, very good at accepting that kind of high status. So what I think that for a happy life, I think you want to be slowly earning more and more status as much as you can throughout your life. And one of the crux points in human life is middle age. Middle age is often when we start running up against our limitations. We certainly start looking less high status. We bulge and we lose hair and our teeth go weird. So I think middle age is a good time to start diversifying your status games and to understand that there are certain games now that you can't play. Like you can't compete on beauty with the young. But you see
Right.
middle-aged people do it all the time, trying to compete with 18-year-olds on beauty. You can't do it. You're making a fool
Right.
of yourself. So stop it. Find other games to play. So I think that's really important. And there are very high rates of suicide and depression in middle age, and I think that's why I think status starts going awry for a lot of people in middle age. Um, so go for small bumps of status throughout your life rather than the big thing. That's it. That's one big one. Another one is to play multiple games. I think especially in your 20s and early 30s, it's probably appropriate to focus most of your energy on one game because in those years you're really putting the work in that's going to power the rest of your life. Like if you start to really nail a status game in your late 20s, early 30s, that you're good for life now. Like because
Right.
you've got an expertise, you've got a specialism, you've got a reputation, fantastic. But as I say, once you hit middle age, you want to start playing multiple games because what happens when stuff starts going wrong, like inevitably when you get to a certain age, 50s, 60s, younger rivals are going to come in and they're going to be better than you. They're going to know, they're
Right.
going to know more than you. They're going to have more energy than you. And so if you're still just playing one game, that's
You might.
psychological death.
Right.
If your identity becomes destroyed, what else have you got? So play multiple games, especially if you're like me and you don't have children. I think if you have children, you automatically start playing the games of I want to be a good mum, I want to be a good
Virtue.
dad.
Yeah.
You start playing status games through your children, and so the status of your children begins to feed you, which is often a healthy thing, but can become unhealthy. But if you haven't got kids, then you really do need to start playing other status games because if all you're doing is playing the career game, you're asking for a nervous breakdown at the age of 54 when you suddenly realise that you ain't cool anymore. So that would be my other advice. And I think finally to be generous with the status that you're giving other people. Like people value status more than money, and it's free. It's free. We have this
Right.
resource to give out to people. We can make people feel good. We can make people feel valuable, and we don't do it often. The caveat is that you've got to be authentic about it. You don't want to fall into that Hollywood LA trap of just telling, "Oh, you're amazing, you're wonderful," because people have got that radar for authenticity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a really good idea to be generous with the status that you give other people. If you appreciate people, if you admire people, tell them they're going to love you for it, and then you're going to get some
That's true.
status back because they're going to want to be around you more. So that's the other kind of big takeaway that I got from the status game.
Well, it's a wonderful summary. You, I think, shared so insightful life lessons, in my opinion. And it's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us, and that would be better if we watch for it. So, really, thank you for sharing all these insights. I know three of your books so far. I always ask the guests at the end of the podcast. Um, what other things you do, where people can find you and your products and services if they're interested. Obviously you are a wealth of knowledge in a very specific and important area of life, in my opinion, so far. Outside of the three books, the science of storytelling, the heretics here, and the status game, what else you produce in your career, and how can people reach to that?
I think the other book with the major book was Selfie, which was about how culture influences the self, especially this is really the story of the Western culture and how it's different to other cultures. I'm launching a Substack at the end of the year. If people are interested in signing up for that, it's going to be called "You Are a Story." And my Twitter is at WStorr, WSTORR, so that people can catch up with me there too. And I also offer regular, well, I say regular, every 3 or 4 months I do a storytelling online workshop, which is quite popular. So yeah,
Oh,
people
I
can.
might join to that.
Yeah. The next one is in July. Yeah, July.
Okay. I'm gonna look it up. Is it on your website or? Where can I
Yeah, the
find it?
science of storytelling.com. Oh, there's a link on my Twitter and on my Instagram, which is William Storr on Instagram. So yeah, it's 3 hour course, just $50. So good
Okay.
value.
Oh yeah, it sounds insane value. Like, the greatest thing of our age, I think the cheapest, the most affordable thing is the information and insight. You buy a book for $20, less than $20 in most cases. The courses, less than $100. You can learn anything and everything wherever you are. So I am just blown away, like how much we can learn and for such small amounts of money in exchange.
It's
So,
better value than a Hermes handbag, isn't it?
oh, tell me about it. Yeah, I definitely like to play that virtue game over there, or
Yeah.
knowledge game a little bit more. But I respect for people who values that as well. It's never a judgment on my end, why are you doing this? I know you have reasons, and we discussed most of those reasons, which is super valid in where they are in their life, what they think, what they feel. So I have respect. You can do it, you feel great. That's good for you. Like, just kudos. My point is
Fantastic.
different. I just want to give people information about leather and how much it's worth, because sometimes when people see the high price tags, and leather has been associated with luxury status because of those warriors wearing it, in thousands of years, because it was a scarce source. It's not anymore. It's readily available. We produce them in tanneries. It's not that expensive anymore. But they still think, oh no, it's a $5,000 bag. Maybe the leather is superior or super expensive.
Mm,
Well, it's not today. That's my point. Just to
mm.
give them another data point when they're doing leather shopping. That's all it's about.
Yeah, well, but your videos are so popular, you might actually start nudging these companies to start using better leather. That would be a great result if that happened.
Oh, I would be the happiest guy if that could be one of the side effects of my videos. I live for leather, so, and hopefully they provide a lot better leathers for their customers, so we all enjoy this beautiful resource better together. That's my mission.
Amazing,
Awesome.
fantastic.
Awesome, Will. Well, this was very, very exciting. I love these topics, and this was different definitely for the audience and the usual topics we discuss here. But I truly appreciate your insights and sparing the time with us here. Thanks for being here, and I'll be in touch, and hopefully I'll get your course to learn more about storytelling.
Thanks, Tan. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you for your excellent questions.